Well, thank you so much for being with us here in Morning at NTV. Friday's edition is majorly centering around arts and culture, appreciating what we do have here in Uganda and how it can be made better. As we kickstart off the year 2025, of course, we've got to have our lenses on the film industry and how it's grown leaps and bounds over 2024 and getting into 2025. What are the promises and what are the new things that you need to look out for on the scene? I am Priscilla Regina Naluoga. Welcome to our Kickstarter this morning that is focusing on a global reach, making authentic African stories resonate globally. Now, many of you have heard of the stories that our great-grandfathers used to sit around a tree, a fireplace, and be told stories, and those stories would be carried on in the same manner to our grandfathers, and then our fathers' storytelling kind of was changed into something else. Today, for our generations, storytelling is in a completely different form, and so merging those two, understanding those two, and appreciating the African story. Today we're focusing on the future of storytelling and how to tell the authentic continental stories in 2025. When you look at Uganda's film industry, it has grown tremendously, without a doubt, but of course, when you look at the storylines, there's something lacking in there. There's an Africanness that is lacking in there, meaning that we still have a long way to go. One major challenge is that the stories being told haven't resonated globally, often due to the lack of perceived authenticity, and so it begs the question, how do we break this particular barrier or challenge? We do have a gentleman who is in the field of film industry here in Uganda. He has all the experience, the expertise, and the education to back him up and talk to us in this regard. He's called Hakim Ziwa, and we are very pleased to have you. Good morning to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. Yeah. So tell us more about yourself in regards to film and the industry.
So I am, in general, I call myself a filmmaker, but also specifically a director and producer. As we speak right now, and I try to see that one of my goals is to make people love Ugandan films again.
Okay.
They once loved them, but at some point there was a shift to Western films. And my goal for the next 5 to 10 years is to try as much as I can to make them like Ugandan films by doing short films that I put on YouTube, so that everyone can see them and start liking Ugandan films again with higher production value, so that in the next 5 to 10 years we could have Ugandan films in the cinema for people to watch for like 3 months. Just imagine that, a Ugandan film screening for 3 months. The box office culture. That's one of my missions, I would say.
All right. Let's talk about your first film. I know that you have a second one that is out, but let's talk about your first film and the authenticity of the African story embedded within that short film.
Right. So the first short film that I ever didn't go out there in the public so much, but the recent one that I did in 2023, which introduced me to the Ugandan film industry, is called Building 62. It's a bit political, I would say. It's on YouTube as well. But the Ugandanness to it is the impunity that exists in our country, and also the crime that exists in our country as well, that has existed in the 70s but also still exists as we speak. So it's fictional. The story is fictional, but the events, the story is based on true events. It happens sometimes. So that's a film that was received positively by the Ugandan audience. And then I thought I would create another story. My stories usually get a little controversial in a way, but that's the genre that I like to explore, and adding some spice of action to it. I like doing action films.
Yeah.
And most of them, there's a bit of some violence, depending on who you're talking to, of course. There's some shooting, some fighting here and there, but that's what Ugandans like to watch, but with Ugandans doing the same stuff as well. Because the fact that people are attracted to Western films, if you bring the same touch, but with Ugandans acting, Ugandan crew, Ugandan director, then I believe they will start loving Ugandan film. And then later on we create bigger films, could go to the cinemas and maybe go beyond the country. And the first film that I created, well, that introduced me to the industry, I did well in festivals, one of which was, he was a finalist in the Africa International Film Festival, which is based in Nigeria, which is one of Africa's biggest film festivals. Pan-African Film Festival in Cannes in France, Black Star International Film Festival in Ghana, and a few more where it really performed well. It's been outstanding, and it kind of motivated me to create another film that I recently directed, which is Boundary Mwisho, Last Boundary, which is another organ trafficking topic, you see. Controversial topic. Organ trafficking is true.
It is true. It is a reality for African countries.
Exactly. So I just put a touch of fiction to it, and focusing on surgeons that operate in organ trafficking. So the story is about this surgeon who needs to serve his sister with the same organ he's tasked to take to the
another patient.
Exactly. So they're pretty short films. The second one, Boundary Mwisho, is 20 minutes. Building 62 was 30 minutes. They're pretty short, so because people's attention span.
You talk about the times and you're thinking, okay, it takes that much little time to even come up with this production of these movies, but I know that's not the case. Take us through the processes that you actually have to go through in order to come up with these short films. In as much as the rare genre, action is very, very different for us here in Uganda. We're more of the drama people.
Right, a lot of drama.
Yeah, so I know that there's a lot of things that you have to put into consideration, set up fast and organize fast before we can have the 30-minute production that you offer us at the end of the day. What are those?
So some of the things are writing, producing, putting a crew together, and that usually is very tasking, I would say. Preparation, there's a lot of preparation, I would say. 3 months before, where I have to write a story.
For example, let's use Building 62.
Right.
Yeah.
So, for example, Building 62 was still like a 3 months prep season, where I had to, because that was my first film to use a lot of people, to have a lot of people from crew and cast. So I was tasked to look out for, I didn't do auditions, first and foremost. I had to go by referral, people referring me to other people that were in the industry at that time. And I was lucky to benefit from the Power Magic wave, the wave of the Mnet multi-choice DSTV. People that, because I had worked on one of the projects in the DSTV films that were commissioned, and I was able to meet people earlier on, and that helped me build a crew. One person tells another, and I'm glad that they trusted me. So a lot of planning with the camera people as well, because I wouldn't have to be on the camera, of course. But 3 days sitting with them, planning how we're going to shoot this, what style of shooting are we going to use, in relation to the story, of course. And then also the actors' rehearsals, because it's an action film, Building 62. We had to rehearse for 2 weeks before shooting, because given the fact that I have a dance background, I've done a lot of choreography for over 10 years. I used to be a manager of Table Floor Dance Company then. And choreography has been an aspect that we've been using in dance theater storytelling. So with action and movement, it has to be repetitive for continuity in the film. So when it come on set, it was just flawless, because they repeat the same thing, repeat the same thing. We didn't have insurance, medical insurance, but that's why we had to rehearse for first 2 weeks, choreograph those fights, and then be very careful, because I was funding myself. No one was funding me, so I had to be very smart about the fact that there's no medical insurance, so we don't want anybody hurt on set. Pretty much, and a lot of challenges in relation to finding locations, because location is one of the biggest challenge in the Ugandan film industry. Getting a place where you're not going to be pushed out, because sometimes what happens, what you intend.
You're given the location for a specific time.
Right. And you have when that time comes and things are a bit slow,
the costs get,
they charge you a
extra,
fine. Or sometimes you find people who want to charge way too much because they think you're coming
they've heard you're coming from film, and they think you do have the money for that.
Exactly. They think you're from DSTV, funding and all that stuff. But we were able to overcome, and I'm glad that the cast and the crew believed in the story. They read the story, They didn't know how it was going to happen, but they just believed in it.
Okay.
Because it felt impossible to do in Uganda, right? But I'm glad that they trusted me, and we made the story happen, and people received the film positively.
All right. You have talked about sets, and you had earlier mentioned high-level production. That's your niche. So I'm trying to imagine that you have some green screens in there, you know, some fake behind the scenes, the dynamics that you have to do. In film, it looks real, but in reality, it's just something that was done within a room. Is that the kind of production that you're using through your films right now?
At this level, with my low budget, not just yet.
Okay.
But I wish I'd had those budgets. But again, it takes me to one of the reasons why I'm making these films, to attract potential investors, people that are willing to invest, because film can get really expensive. I'm talking about film with high production value, because anyone can make a film now with a phone.
So break it down. When you say high production value, what does that mean?
So I'm talking about from story development to the photography, cinematography, to the crew, how big the crew is, production design, as you see the studio, this is already production design, right? To things like post-production, the editing, color grading, audio post-production, the music, because they would have to design specific music for that specific film so it stands out, which really gets a bit tasking, and it takes a while. All that stuff is expensive. Yeah. So in the future, that's why I'm thinking in the future, if people, this is part of my portfolio as a filmmaker, to attract people that have some good money to go on another level. Do a film that people will feel proud of as Ugandans. I want to make Ugandans proud of Ugandan films, because most of the people have always asked, are these Ugandans? Were they shot in Uganda? Is it Uganda? I'm Ugandan, and I'm proud to be Ugandan, even though I don't spend the most of the time in Uganda, but I still want to do something, add a piece to the puzzle, to the film industry, so it grows. We all win as Ugandans. If something goes out there that's really nice, Uganda gets a good image to the world, and they appreciate it.
Okay, let's talk about you as a storyteller. Wallace Oyinka said the role of an artist is to fight to protect the people's identity. One of the infringements on African storytelling is the Western world, and how we feel because theirs are more successful, we should be telling their kind of stories or producing their kind of films versus telling our very own African story and placing our identity or embedding it within, you know, the work that is done, for example, in the film industry. How have you been able to intentionally keep the African story at the center?
So that's a good question, because it's something I've been struggling with, honestly. Because my first move, especially for the first film, if you look at Building 62 and Boundary Mwisho, there's a bit of a difference in storytelling. The first one, the one that introduced me to the industry, Building 62, I tried to walk around, I tried to make the story around the things that happen in the country in relation to the fact that someone could be insecure around what the people call agents or state agents, that type of thing, if you get what I mean, right? I don't want to step on people's toes, but I tried to make it a bit political, not too much, but a bit political, because what happens is that in that film, events unfold, they shoot somebody on the street, and people are just looking and people are just walking away. Yes. That happens a lot, right? But again, at the same time, moving to Boundary Mwisho, the last boundary, I go around organ trafficking, which is a big thing in the Uganda itself. And I had to involve hospitals, not to say that hospitals do it, but there's rumors. And actually, I was watching an interview. You
had to collaborate your story.
Right, exactly. So kind of put that hospital thing, because in the news, it's always like, in the hospitals, these things happen. Why did they take my, you know, someone dies. Why did they take my stuff out? But according to, I was watching an interview, and a doctor from Zambia was mentioning that it's legal, according to the law, if the organs are useful to the next person, the doctors have the right to take it up with that. It's not illegal, but people don't know that's legal, right? So kind of touching things that are within our society as we speak and putting them into a film and put some fiction around it and some action to make people want to watch it, right? So kind of like communicating these society things that happen by using film and adding fiction to the story, so people, to make it interesting, of course. But in the future, I do intend to incorporate more deep African stories. And it's a bit tricky because we've grown up watching Western films.
Of course.
So we're corrupted.
Yes.
So, but still, I've talked to a few people that have been in the industry for a while, and they've told me it's still possible to keep the genre of action, suspense, but still make the story more African in a way. It's a work in progress, I would say. Yeah.
All right, so as we are trying to keep the identity of Africa at the center of the projects that you're working on, what are some of the challenges that you have had to face and also overcome, and how does that inspire other people?
The challenges, I would say, funding. That's one of the biggest ones. I mean, there's funding sources. UCC does do some funding. DSTV used to do commissioning, but not anymore. I've had Showmax is about to do some other commission, but funding, and also, of course, government is supporting through UCC, but also I would say, yeah, funding, and also the friendliness from the community in relation to locations. If they would see us filmmakers as people who are ready to hold the Ugandan flag on the global, they would make our life easier. Because with locations, sometimes, depending on where you face the camera, people think you're from a TV station or you're trying to capture moments. Or they feel like you are making money off them by even if the camera is facing a character specifically. That because we had a scenario on the Building 62 set where someone had a bar and the bar was in the background and the camera was facing the bar, and he created a scene for no reason, right? And we had to stop, calm him down, because at that moment, time is running out, money's on the line. If that day goes beyond, you're going to pay for another day. It's going to cost you, right? Yes. So we had to, locations, funding, and also, the community support. See us as people who are going to hold the Ugandan flag for the country. We all win at the end of the day anyway. All
right. You've talked about the funding. Yes, it's true, but I thought that you would talk about the fact that the people you have to work with did not really feel they want to tell the African identity of a story. Have you had that challenge with the people that you've had to work with so far?
I have not, because
of the corrupted mind that you talked about, the movies that we've been watching, a Western world. Right.
So I've had that challenge. Well, not really. Yes and no. Yes, they've expressed the opinions because I'm open to ideas from the story perspective as we're shooting. So I welcome the ideas, but I have this huge filter where I have to say, okay, I see what you're saying, but I'm sticking to this. It's better if we, for example, for Bandari Mwisho, I made sure that there was a bit of Swahili, Luganda, and English, hence the name as well. So certain lines I was very specific that we need to keep these in Swahili. I was glad, I was lucky to have someone who was fluent in Swahili on set. Her name is Zion Kente. She's a radio presenter, and she actively helped to make the Swahili sound very authentic, the lines so the grammar to feel more authentic, so the film could speak to people beyond Uganda, East Africa in general.
All right, as we close this conversation, Bandari Mwisho is up on YouTube. Talk to us about that and what people should be expecting. I will tell you, the graphics are James Bond vibes, or Bond identity if you've watched the sequel. Yes.
So Bandari Mwisho is a crime drama or an action drama on YouTube, and it's a film people should expect to see things rotating around relationships, brother to sister, friends, relationships. Even though the topic is dark, organ trafficking, but the story rotates around a surgeon who needs to save a sister, using the same organ he's tasked to transport to his bosses. And that's where the whole chaos starts. Wow. So it's a pretty interesting action, intense suspense. I would I feel like Ugandans would really love this film because so far already they really, really like it, and they don't imagine that this is Ugandan
made, yes.
And the sound, the music by Quad A, it's outstanding, and I'm hoping to produce more films like this if more people jump on board and we do great stuff for the country.
All right. Well, thank you so much for pushing the boundaries, Hakim. Hakim Ziwa, he has a new film that is out, a short film on YouTube, and it is called Boundary Mwisho. Check it out and enjoy that action-packed, yes, action-packed. It has a bit of suspense in it. I was previewing it, was like, is this really Ugandan? Well, you can attest for yourself that it is truly Ugandan. So support Uganda so that we can have bigger feature films like this. More conversations coming your way here on Morning at NTV. We're going to be looking to Uganda in the diaspora benefiting from a convention that is around the corner, the UNA convention. And then later on, we'll also be looking into the relationship between religion and society and cultures as of